वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोधानंदन ब्रज धन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीर वनचारी यमुना तीर वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्र सदस्य श्रीमद श्रीलेसी भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय। जय वो विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्र सदस्य श्रीमद श्रील भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद भागवतम की जय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय रीडिंग फ्रॉम श्रीमद् भागवतम कैंटो 9 चैप्टर 18 चैप्टर टाइटल किंग ययाति regains his youth text 23 please repeat ययाति हि अनभिप्रेतं दैव उपहृतं आत्मनः मनः तु तद्गतं बुद्ध्वा प्रतिजग्राह तत्वचः ययातिरनभिप्रेतं दैवोपहृतमात्मनः मनस्तु तद्गतं बुद्ध्वा प्रतिजग्राह तद्वचः 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 ययातिरनभिः प्रेतं दैवोपहृतमात्मनः मनस्तु तद्गतं बुद्ध्वा प्रतिजग्राह तद्वचः. माताजी, ययातिरनभिप्रेतं दैवोपहृतमात्मनः मनस्तु तद्गतं बुद्ध्वा प्रतिजग्राह तद्वचः. ययाति ही किंग ययाति अनभिप्रेतं not liked, Daiva upahritam brought about by providential arrangements, Atmanaha his personal interest, Manaha mind, Tu however, Tadgatam being attracted to her, Buddhva by such intelligence, Pratijagraha accepted, Tatvachaha the words of Devayani. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder of ISKCON. Translation. Sukadeva Goswami continued, because such a marriage is not sanctioned by regular scriptures, King Yayati did not like it, but because it was arranged by providence, and because he was attracted by Devayani's beauty, he accepted her request. Purport. According to the Vedic system, the parents would consider the horoscopes of the boy and girl who were to be married. If, according to astrological calculations, the boy and girl were compatible in every respect, the match was called Yotaka, and the marriage would be accepted. Even 50 years ago, this system was current in Hindu society. Regardless of the affluence of the boy or the personal beauty of the girl, without this astrological compatibility, the marriage would not take place. A person is born in one of three categories known as Devagana, Manushyagana, and Rakshasagana. In different parts of the universe, there are demigods and demons, and in human society also, some people resemble demigods, whereas others resemble demons. If, according to astrological calculations, there was conflict between a godly and a demonic nature, the marriage would not take place. Similarly, there were calculations of Pratiloma and Anuloma. The central idea is that if the boy and girl were on an equal level, the marriage would be happy, whereas inequality would lead to unhappiness. Because care is no longer taken in marriage, we now find many divorces. Indeed, divorce has now become a common affair. Although formerly one's marriage would continue lifelong, and the affection between husband and wife was so great that the wife would voluntarily die when her husband died, or would remain a faithful widow throughout her entire life. Now, of course, this is no longer possible, for human society has fallen to the level of animal society. Marriage now takes place simply by agreement. Dhampatye aviruchir hetu. Bhagavatam, Canto 12, Chapter 2, Text 3. The word aviruchi means agreement. If the boy and girl simply agree to marry, the marriage takes place. But when the Vedic system is not rigidly observed, marriage frequently ends in divorce. Om Jnanam Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshurun Militamena Tasmain Shri Guruve Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langete Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dyanatarinam Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savathutam Parjanasagitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Dinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktarunda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yayatir Anabhipretam Daivo Paurutamatmanaha Manastu Tadgatam Buddha Pratijagraha Tadvachaha. Translation. Shukadeva Goswami continued, because such a marriage is not sanctioned by regular scriptures, King Yayati did not like it, but because it was arranged by providence and because he was attracted by Devayani's beauty, he accepted her request. So here we are seeing the story of King Yayati, how he married Devayani. And the slokas that we are currently seeing, they are very much of importance to the society in general. It's very important for the society to keep in mind the instructions that right now we are seeing here in this part of Srimad Bhagavatam. Why this is important in a society? Because society cannot run without individuals, and individuals means human beings taking birth, and human beings are generally accepted to take birth within a marriage. Though anybody can be born without marriage also, but in a civilized society, birth takes place after the marriage. So this is of concern for the society, because we want society to be a civilized society, not just any society. There are so many societies. There are societies of animals, societies of birds. And as per Shastra, there are many categories of species. 84 lakh species of life. So one may see there are so many societies. Though they may not, the society other than human society, they don't see themselves as belonging to any particular society, but still we know that there are so many societies, and we as human beings want to live a society which is civilized. That's why we see here King Yayati, though he was attracted to the beauty of a beautiful girl, it's nature for a conditioned soul to be attracted to the opposite party. The conditioned soul, when it accepts a particular body, a particular gender body, then it gets attracted to the opposite gender. If it takes the body of an animal, then if it's a male, then it is attracted to the female counterpart. The same thing in the case of birds also, fishes, everywhere. Everywhere we see that there is always a male and then the female counterpart. And similarly in human society also, there is males and females are there, and it is expected for a conditioned soul, because of living a conditioned material life, it is natural for the soul to be attracted to the opposite sex. That's why in a civilized society, there are so many rules and regulations. Here we see that King Yayati, though he had the natural inclination of being attracted to a beautiful girl, still he was thinking much about. Here we see that he was attracted to Devayani's beauty, there is no doubt about that. But still he was seeing whether the marriage which if it happens because of my attraction to Devayani, is it sanctioned in the Shastra? So he was seeing so many things. Or before saving Devayani from the well, he has to question her. I think this was spoken in detail by Ram Kumar yesterday, that where you are from, who is your father, so what is your caste. So he has to see so many things before accepting the hand of Devayani. Then only he could go for the marriage proposal. So this is very much of concern for the civilized society. And Srila Prabhupada, he explains in the purport so many different items which may be of great concern for the modern people. In fact, the things that Srila Prabhupada mentions in this particular section, they are not at all accepted by the modern society. Like Srila Prabhupada, he speaks about astrological matches before going for marriage. I don't think modern society is now going to accept that. In fact, as per Srimad Bhagavatam, which Srila Prabhupada quotes, that Dampatiye abhiruchur hetu, that everybody wants to get married just because they like. Agreement means just like. Your boy likes a girl, then he wants to marry. A girl likes a boy, then she wants to marry. It's all based on likes and dislikes. If there is a like, then naturally there comes a dislike. Then the marriage ends in divorce, because the marriage took place because of the like. Then when there is a dislike, then it ends in divorce. But that was not the case previously. So before the marriage takes place, it's not because of the liking of the boy and the girl that the marriage takes place, though in certain exceptions, like Rakshasa marriage, it may happen. But generally, marriages happen in an arranged way. In the parents, they take so much effort in getting their son or daughter married to a particular boy or a girl. This is so much stressed in the Vedic culture. So that Srila Prabhupada speaks here about the astrological matches that the parents should see for their daughter or the son is not accepted by the modern society. And the chastity that we see in this section, that is also of not much concern. In fact, that is also not at all concern for the modern society. And also the widow system that is prevalent in the Vedic times, that is also not all accepted by the society. Srila Prabhupada, he speaks about the widow system in this last section. Here he says that he did not use the word widow, but here we see that Srila Prabhupada is saying that, and the affection between husband and wife was so great that the wife would voluntarily die when her husband died. I mean, Srila Prabhupada speaks about the sati system, which is also not accepted by the modern society nowadays. That the wife would voluntarily die when her husband died, or would remain a faithful widow throughout her entire life. Yeah, the word widow is used. So Srila Prabhupada says that the chaste wife will remain her whole life a chaste. Even if the husband is alive or dead, she remains chaste her whole life. So that is also against the modern society. So the principles that Srila Prabhupada speaks about in this particular section is completely not at all acceptable for the modern society. So all these things, if you try to explain, if you try to explain the chastity, if you try to explain the widow system, if you try to explain the sati system, or the early marriage system, or the marriage that should take place only with the arrangement of the parents after seeing the astrological charts, is not at all going to be accepted by the modern society. In modern society, people are so much concerned about sense gratification. That's the problem. That's where we see the difference between the Vedic society and the modern society. Vedic society is meant for a different purpose. The goal of Vedic society is not at all sense gratification. Though sense gratification is allowed, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Kama is also allowed. It's not that there is no possibility of sense gratification, but even such sense gratification allowed in the Vedic society, it's also part of the principles of dharma. Even yesterday, Ramkumar Prabhu was so much stressing on the principles of dharma, that how one should strictly follow the principles of dharma. That's very important, rather than simply speaking about our own sense gratification. When somebody speaks about sense gratification, then they will always speak about the rights, which is most prevalent in the modern society. Vedic society, it's all about dharma, and modern society is always about rights. In Vedic society also, it's not that there are no rights. In fact, Krishna speaks about the right in Bhagavad Gita also, adhikar. But what right that Krishna speaks about in Bhagavad Gita? Karmanye vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. You only have the right to perform the duty. So the right that the Vedic system prescribes for the human society is to engage in dharma. This is the only right that one has to do. So ultimately, the human society in civilized Vedic, based on civilized Vedic principles, it's all about doing duty. The right that they have is to perform the duty. And perform the duty, that also mafaleshu kadachana. You can't expect any result also from that duty. So this is the duty that the Vedic principle, that the Vedas are setting for the human society. This is very, very important. See, we are speaking about so many principles. We are speaking about the different principles of early marriage, or widow system, or the sati system, or the brahmacharya principles, the principles of chastity. It's all meant for the purpose of producing good progeny. Srila Prabhupada, he says in one of the lectures that chastity is meant for producing good children, good population. And all the principles are meant for this one particular thing. Your wife keeping strictly the principles of chastity, or the husband strictly following the principles of brahmacharya, it's all ultimately meant for producing, not ultimately it has a different purpose that let me speak about that later. But we know that the whole point of following the principles of chastity or brahmacharya in a marriage is for producing good progeny. That's why we see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, when he was engaging Arjuna to fight for the war, Arjuna was not ready to go for the war, because he was saying that if at all I am going to engage in this warfare, then how come the principles of varnashram dharma will be followed? Adharma vivad Krishna pradurshyanti kulastriyas trishu dushtashu vasneya jhayate varna sankara. So Arjuna was complaining that if at all I am going to engage in such principles, such war principles, and by killing the persons who have assembled in front of me, then it seems that I am going to break the varnashrama principles. Adharma vivad, that this is going to be adharma. So how I can do that? So this is the concern for the civilized human beings that Arjuna is setting forth. In fact, that's why the civilized human society is called the Aryan society. Srila Prabhupada, he is speaking in the purport about different systems, about different principles, and all these principles are meant for the followers of varnashrama dharma. And Srila Prabhupada, he says that Aryan means one who follows varnashrama dharma. So Aryan means, Prabhupada has said many times that Aryan means a person who is progressive in spiritual life. And also, Aryan also means that, progressive in spiritual life means then he takes up the principles that one has to follow so that he can go towards the path of God realization, which is so perfectly given in the varnashrama dharma. That's why we see that the goal of varnashrama dharma is haritoshanam. To please Hari is the goal of varnashrama dharma. So the progressive life for the Aryan society is based on varnashrama dharma. And varnashrama dharma is all about so many rules and regulations. For each and everything, there is a rule and a regulation for that. And the rules and regulations may not be palatable for the people who are taking up that particular dharma, but still one has to strictly follow that principle so that the goal of that engagement in this particular dharma is achieved. So this has to be seen, not that we cannot just give up the principles of the Vedic dharma and then simply for the purpose of living a life of nice sense gratification, just give up all these principles. So we do not want to live a life like that. As practitioners of Krishna consciousness, we want to follow the principles that are set forth by the Vedas. So we want to follow each and every detail that the varnashrama dharma is setting for us. So here, Srila Prabhupada, in fact, yesterday there was a big discussion about the pratiloma and anuloma. Oh yeah, this is also. So this Pratiloma, Anuloma, which this is also, in fact, this is, I think, this will be highly a very controversial point for the modern thinkers. They are not at all going to accept this principle of Pratiloma and Anuloma, but which is much stressed in this part of Srimad Bhagavatam. In fact, Yayati, he doesn't want to marry Devyani just because this marriage is going to be a Pratiloma marriage. Pratiloma marriage means the girl is from a higher society and the boy is from a lower society. Though Pratiloma and Anuloma, they are not, we can say, Pratiloma is completely not accepted by the Vedic principles. Anuloma, though this is not recommended by the Shastra, but still this is accepted within Vedic discipline. So Pratiloma and Anuloma, this is like crossbreeding. The general principle is that in which society one belongs, either a Brahmana society or a Kshatriya society, Vaishya society, and we take a girl or a boy from the same society. So such crossbreedings are generally avoided. And if at all there is any crossbreeding, then this principle of Anuloma is accepted, but never the principle of Pratiloma. So these things are very strictly followed in Vedic culture. And definitely for modern people, these things are not at all accepted. It's a big controversial point for them, that how come, in fact they may say that all these things that we are speaking about, it's all primitive ideas. No, but we are not concerned about whether this is primitive or this is modern. In fact, we simply want to follow the Shastra. Phalena paricharyate, let us see the result. We see that the society that we are currently living in, though they are against all of these principles, let us see what this society is producing. Whether the society is producing good children, or the society is producing a very happy, peaceful, prosperous life. No, we are not seeing anything like that. Children are not at all disciplined nowadays, that we could clearly see. In the schools, colleges, children are not at all disciplined. And also we see that people are not at all having a very peaceful life. They are not living a happy life. And in the name of advancement, some sort of comforts are there. But still, for most, and practically for everybody, life is empty. The heart is empty. Because as Srila Prabhupada writes in the end of the purport, but when the Vedic system is not rigidly observed, marriage frequently ends in divorce. So when the Vedic system, the ideas or the concepts or the system that Krishna has given, if they are not followed rigidly, then definitely marriage ends in divorce. Whether the marriage or anything, but actually marriage is very important. Why? Because of marriage, the whole society will be completely peaceless. It's because society means definitely procreation. Without procreation, how there is society? And such procreation is always good only when these things happen within marriage under some rules and regulations, which are so perfectly put in Varnashrama. So these things are very much important. Then we should clearly observe and then follow all these things. In fact, this modern society which is so much against these principles, especially when you speak about Pratiloma and Anuloma, they always try to say that there is so much of inequality. In fact, Srila Prabhupada, he is also speaking about equality. The central idea is that if the boy and girl were on an equal level, the marriage would be happy, whereas inequality would lead to unhappiness. So Srila Prabhupada is speaking about the equality in each society. But then, see, we should always know that not that every individual is always equal with the other individual in all aspects. There are always different categories of persons. So we cannot simply say that everybody is equal. This may be very highly attractive for the people to hear, but then this is simply a nonsense idea that everybody is equal. This is the principle set forth by Karl Marx in his philosophy of communism, that everybody is equal. So everybody should share whatever is there in the society on a completely equal basis. Of course, he has also put some rules and regulations for how it should be, but ultimately he says that everybody is equal. In fact, such a system is also there in Shastra. Not that Shastra is saying that everybody is not all equal. In a higher sense, everybody is equal. That we see in Gita also. Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna says, what to speak about human society, Krishna is so much broad-minded, he says that even the living beings who are engaged in the body of animals, birds, trees, they are also equal to the living beings who are engaged in the body of a human being. That, what is this? Brahman, what is the particular words? Vidya vinaya sampanne, brahmane gavihastini, suni chaiva sapakecha, pandita samadarshina. So a learned person sees everybody equal. So everybody is seen equal in Vedic society also, but that equality is different from the communistic idea, which is trying to propose that everybody should be equal in all levels, particularly with respect to the body. We see that the result of communism is that, they say that everybody is equal. Okay, let your philosophy of communism, when it is saying everybody is equal, let it advance human society to a very higher level. But we see that because of the principles of this communism, everybody is brought down to the level of an animal. In fact, we see in human society, in Vedic human society, everybody is upgraded to the higher position to become a lover of God. And in that society, everybody is becoming equal, a servant of God. So everybody is equal in the sense that we are all servants of God. That's why in communism we see that there is so much of enviousness of the lower sections about the higher sections. So when they see that the higher sections of people, they're exploiting us, then they want to bring down the higher section to their level, not that lower section to go to the higher level. The fallacy of this communism is that they just simply bring down all the higher sections to the lower sections. Not that they try to bring the lower section to the higher section, but in Vedic society, everybody should advance. Not that a Shudra should remain a Shudra. Shudra should advance to become a Brahmana, and ultimately one should become a servant of God, Vaishnava. So this is Vedic society, that all the principles are set forth so that everybody advances and then everybody becomes a lover of God. And in that sense, everybody is in the same equal position. But that's not the case with the modern society. They oppose all these principles, but in spite of speaking so much against these Vedic principles, the result is that simply people are suffering. They just break all these principles, but the result is that people are simply suffering. So we should accept all these principles. When the Shastra says that Pratiloma is not to be accepted, then we should try to avoid the marriages that happen in a Pratiloma society. And then when Shastra says that a boy and girl, when they marry on an equal level, then they will be happy, then we should accept that and then try to have an equal match. And that equal match is generally done as per astrological chart. Here Srila Prabhupada is beginning his purport in such a way that previously the parents, they used to see this astrological chart before the marriage. The parents would consider the horoscopes of the boy and girl who were to be married. So only if the astrological calculations are matching, then the marriage happens. Otherwise it doesn't happen. Srila Prabhupada says that even 50 years ago, this system was current in human society. Srila Prabhupada was saying this in the 1970s. Prabhupada wrote this purports in the 1970s. So Srila Prabhupada was saying that time, that 50 years before, such things were current. And then to a certain degree, still we see that It is still current. Even now also in traditional societies, in many parts of India, marriages happen after seeing the astrological calculation. If the astrological calculation is not going to match, then the marriage doesn't happen. I remember that my uncle was so strict in following this principle of matching this astrological calculation. My uncle and my aunt, they were so strict that even after the daughter was 30 years old, they did not want to get her married. I know this is extreme. I know this is really extreme. Shastra says that the girl is supposed to get married before she attains puberty. No, but I am just making a point that for many years, for practically a decade, they were just always, maybe they would have seen hundreds of horoscopes. Just because the horoscope was not at all matching, they were just denying the proposal for marriage. Just because the horoscope was not at all matching. And the age was going. That is also not there. In fact, we have to follow the Shastra in seeing the horoscope. Everybody will have this Jata Karma. So the Jataka will be there. So there is the Jyotish experts are there who will take care of seeing the matches. That also is to be followed. And also one more thing, this early marriages, that also to be followed. So modern society will not agree on that point also, this early marriage. I said that in our family that a marriage happened after 30 years of 30 years of age for my sister, means my cousin sister. So that is also not at all acceptable as per Vedic society. One should get married in a very early age, especially as per Shastra, girls are to be gotten married before they attain puberty. I think, I don't exactly remember, this comes in one of the conversation. Srila Prabhupada, he says that if at all the father is not getting her daughter married before she attains puberty, then after the death, he has to go to a hell where he has to take the menstrual fluid as his punishment for not getting her daughter married before puberty. So this is there is a Shastic injunction, and then if one doesn't follow, then this is the result. Then we can imagine, I do not know, I think Srila Prabhupada somewhere says that we should not take it literally, but then we should know that if such regulations are not followed, then the society will result in a chaos. In fact, Srila Prabhupada explains the psychology behind this early marriage. Why early marriage should happen? Because the psychology of a girl is that the boy with whom she comes in contact with at first, and then she is becoming very intimate with him, then she will remain in her whole life chasteful. So this is the point. So the idea of early marriage is that she remains whole life chaste. And obviously, when a girl attains puberty, or when a boy reaches his puberty, then naturally the attraction for the opposite sex is there. Then if the marriage is there, then it is very convenient for the boy and girl to engage in the affair and then produce good children. If you are simply postponing the marriage, even after puberty, even after many years of puberty, she is not married, then how she is going to control her emotions? So it's natural that she wants to satisfy her this sex desire. That's nature for a conditioned soul when they accept a particular body. Then it's let it be done dharmic way. Let the girl and the boy unite in a dharmic way and engage in sex life. So the proper way is as per Shastra, that getting the daughter or the boy in a early marriage. That's why a girl is recommended to get married before she attains puberty. But then others may not. In fact, the modern society will definitely go against this principle. I remember, I think, I'm not sure, but then I think I read this somewhere in one of Guru Maharaj's book, Glimpses of Traditional Indian Life. I think Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, he's having a conversation with, he had a conversation with Rasraj Prabhu. I think he's the, maybe long back he was the in charge of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. So in that conversation, Bhakti Vikas Maharaj was speaking with Rasraj Prabhu about the principles that was prevalent in Vedic society. So that time Rasraj Prabhu, he spoke from his experience, how he was studying how he went for higher studies in America, and then there he had a experience of the modern Americans condemning the Vedic society about the various principles, like maybe the caste system or widow system, or particularly Rasraj Prabhu was speaking about this early marriage system. So there, when he was speaking to his friends and saying that he was from India, that time he was mocked for being in that Hindu society where he has come from, that you are all so much primitive that you have this early marriage. How this is acceptable? Why you have to put a very young girl, very tender aged girl in a marriage system? So Rasraj Prabhu, he could understand this foolish notion of the modern Americans. So that time in America, or maybe even now also in America, not just in America, all over the Western world, and maybe somewhere in India also, there was a problem called child pregnancy. Means teenage pregnancy, child pregnancy. Means at an early age. Means the girl is engaged in a sexual affair with a boy, and then she becomes pregnant. So Prabhu, he just got this point, and then he spoke. You are so much poking your nose into our Vedic society. You are so much speaking about that early marriage, that what is the result of your American society where this child pregnancy is there? Do you think this is proper? He was asking. So this is much logical. See, they are speaking so much against this early marriage, but then why not speak about child pregnancy? Why should a child become pregnant? They are saying that early marriage we are against, but then they are so much favorable for child pregnancy then. Okay, child pregnancy they meant allow, but then they are allowing child abortions. Somebody who is 14-year-old is getting pregnant, and then she is getting aborted is so much common in the Western society. So it means very clear, everybody, a boy or a girl, when they are in their youth, they have this sexual desire, and then it's natural that whoever is nearby, they just want to have an affair with them. So better to get them married at an early age and then live a proper dharmic life. So that's the point, that's the psychology, that why Vedic society has to stress the importance of early marriage or chastity or brahmacharya or any system, the principles of Brahmana, the principles of a Kshatriya or sannyas. It's all having a purpose. Garbhadhana samskara, everything has a purpose. Everything has a purpose. Particularly, all these things that we are discussing in this section is all for producing good children. Why should Yayatis so much speak about this compatibility of his marriage with Devani? Because he has to produce good progeny, and that progeny is going to be the leader, the future leader for the whole planet. So he has to see all these things, because any bad progeny, that is going to create a havoc. So these principles are very much of importance, because the Yayati is having a public life. It's not that Yayati is some local. He is not that he's a common citizen. He is the leader of all citizens. So he has to set these principles. He cannot simply do anything and everything and then spoil the society which he himself is going to rule. It's very easy to rule a society which is following principles, rules, regulations. It's not at all possible to rule a society when nobody is following rules. Means it's difficult to control the animals. We can control human beings. It's very difficult to control the animals. And especially if the animals are living a very wild life, then it's difficult. It's difficult to control the wild animals. Wild animals are toughest to be controlled. And especially if wild animals are very tough to be controlled, then just imagine if a human being having the body of a human being but then acting like an animal, then it is very difficult to control the society. Then definitely we can expect all sorts of chaos in the society. That's why we say in Hitopadesh, the principle that differentiates the human society from animal society is dharma. Ahar nidra bhayam maitunam cha samanyam etat pashuvinarana dharmo hi tesham adhiko vishesho. That vishesha, that extra, this wonderful quality that differentiates human society from animal society is dharma. Dharmena hina pashubi samana. If at all that dharma is not there, then you are equal to an animal only. A human being simply becomes an animal because he is not taking up any rules and regulations to follow, to live a dharmic life. So these things are very important. That's why Shastra always stresses this dharma very much. This widow system or chastity, it's all meant for following dharma. And though all these principles are there, the principle that we spoke, this widow system or the sati system or the early marriage or the principles of brahmacharya, chastity, it's all meant for living a dharmic life. And we should also know that though Srila Prabhupada, he speaks about, and though the whole Shastra is also speaking about these principles of chastity or brahmacharya, or the widow system, sati system, it's all ultimately meant for the purpose of pleasing Krishna. This is very important. We speak about all this pratiloma, aniloma marriage, but all these things are ultimately meant for pleasing Krishna. There is a particular verse in the Shastra that says that smartavya satatam Vishnu vismartavya na jatuchit sarve vidhi nishedasyor etayor eva kinkaraha. Shastra is putting forth sarve vidhi means a rule, sarve vidhi nishedasor yetayor eva kinkaraha. That rule should be the servant of the above rule that has been said. What was the above rule mentioned? Smartavya sadatam Vishnu vismartavya na jaduchit. Always remember Vishnu, Krishna, and never forget Krishna. So this is the primary goal. That's why we see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying Vedaischa sarver aham meva vedyo vedanta krit vedavit evachaham. The purpose of the Veda is to know, to understand Krishna and serve him. So the rules and regulations that the Shastra put forth, that you should follow brahmacharya principle, you should follow chastity, that you should follow the principles of varnashrama dharma, you should follow this sati system, you should follow this this widow system. Yeah, of course, sati is not to be, should be followed, but then the sati system, which is with the Shastra, recommends and can be followed, it's all meant for satisfying Krishna. So that is the main point. That a girl is following chastity, a boy taking up the principles of brahmacharya, it's all ultimately meant for pleasing Krishna. Or it should ultimately go for pleasing Krishna. Otherwise, following these principles, also it's like Shamayavi Kevalam. Yeah, that's a very beautiful verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, that dharma swanishista pumsan vishwakshenu katasyaha notpadayed yadiratim shamayeva hi kevalam. Dharma, the word dharma, especially if you see the second chapter of Bhagavatam, this principle of the word dharma comes so much stress. Even in the first chapter of the first canto, there also we speak about the word dharma. So dharma swanishtitasya pumsam. Swanishthita means anushta, it means you are just following up. What? You are following up this dharma. Swanishthita dharma swanishthita pumsam vishwakshena katasyaha. This principle that you are following, that the occupation that you are doing, the duty that you are doing, It should be meant for the pleasure of Krishna. Vishvakshena katasyaha. That ultimately you are doing all these principles. You are following the brahmacharya principle, you are following the principle of chastity, or you are following the principle of varnashram dharma, or you are engaging yourself in garbhana samskara. All these things should ultimately make you get attracted to hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Vishvakshenu katasyaha. That you should get your attention to hear to the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna. Then only the dharma that you are following is accepted. Otherwise, notpadayet yatiratim. Notpadayet means you are no attraction, no rati. You don't have any rati to hear about the message of Vishvakshena, Krishna, then Shamayevahi Kevalam. It's all useless. It's all useless. So one is following the principle of brahmacharya or chastity. It's all ultimately meant for pleasing Krishna. That's why we see that the varnashma dharma is meant for pleasing Krishna. Varnashma charvatena purushena parapuman. Vishnu aradite pantan anya tattosha karanam. It's all meant for worshipping Krishna. And atappumbi dijashreshta varnashma vivagashaha. Sonishtitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam. So it's all meant for pleasing Krishna. All the principles that the Shastra is setting forth, it's all the principles of Varnashram Dharma or the rules and regulations that Varnashram Dharma is putting on the members of it, it's all meant for pleasing Krishna. That we should know. So all these things are meant for the pleasure of Krishna. And if that pleasure of Krishna is not attained, then Shamayavi Kevalam. Then what's the point of following all these principles? That one is so much of seeing how a marriage should take place, how a girl should live a very chaste life, or how a brahmachari should follow the principles of brahmacharya. And if it is not ultimately coming to the point of serving Krishna, then what is the use? We often hear that women should follow chastity. Yes, as per Shastra, this is a strong recommendation. In fact, Arjuna is so much speaking for that principle only. Oh yeah, I just forgot to say one particular point. In fact, Arjuna, when he spoke about the principles of Varna Shankara, means the principle of not to be engaged in this warfare just because that if at all the Kshatriyas who are engaged in this war field are dying, then women will become polluted. Arjuna, in that particular instance, he was thinking of these marriages of Pratiloma. Because obviously who are all assembled, they are all Kshatriya. Kshatriya men have assembled. And if the Kshatriya men, they are all coming from the higher society, and if the Kshatriya men are all destroyed or all killed in the battle, then the Kshatriya women, they will be without protection. So Arjuna was much concerned about the Pratiloma which will happen in the future, or the women who will get polluted. Yeah, so now coming to the point that this chastity which we are stressing, or the principles of brahmacharya that we are stressing for the brahmacharis, it's all meant for pleasing Krishna. We want the girl to be chaste so that she will produce nice progeny. Nice progeny means to produce a child who will become Krishna conscious. That's the main purpose of chastity. Not that we just follow the principles in the Shastra for our own sense gratification. No. One may follow the principles of the Shastra for sense gratification, but that's not our goal. Our goal of following brahmachari principle or the principles of chastity is for pleasing Krishna. That's why in the Shastra, though the highly chaste women are glorified, just like we see that Gandhari is glorified for her chastity, and also Damayanti is also glorified for her chastity, because these women, they did not give up their husbands at any cost. Damayanti was so chaste that Nala became, practically he was a beggar, completely poor. He did not have anything to maintain the household. But still, Damayanti was very chaste to Nala. So such exalted chastity is there in the Shastra. And also we see that Gandhari was also very exalted in her chastity, because she did not want to see the world because her husband couldn't see the world. Just because her husband couldn't see the whole world, she was also ready for that. Let me also not see the world. And then her whole life, she always accompanied Dhritarashtra, her husband. Gandhari, even after Dhritarashtra left the kingdom and went to the forest, Gandhari accompanied her. So we know that this principle of chastity was so much followed by Gandhari. She was so powerful that with her chastity she could make the body of her son Duryodhana completely iron. Then we can see how much powerful this chastity. A chaste woman can really produce such a powerful child. So that's why chastity is so much stressed in the Shastra, that with that chastity they will be able to produce good children. But this chastity, we should know, it should be meant for the pleasure of Krishna. Otherwise, what's the point? That's why we see Gandhari is not glorified in Srimad Bhagavatam. Our Nala Damayanti story we are not seeing in Srimad Bhagavatam, though they are all there. In a Karma Kanda part, this may be there. But then ultimately we see that in Srimad Bhagavatam, Gandhari is not at all glorified. In fact, we see that in one of the purports in Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada, he says that Gandhari was envious of Kunti Maharani. So Gandhari is not at all glorified in Srimad Bhagavatam, because after all, in one sense, okay, she followed her husband and then he was able to attain impulse liberation, then maybe she also attained such things. But then she is not famous as a pure devotee of Krishna to get her glory. In fact, though she is so much followed the principles of chastity, she could produce only demons from her body. She produced 100 demons who were against the Pandavas. She is so much chaste, but then she was envious of Kunti Maharani, and then she has to produce only the demons. Duryodhana came. And then we know how big a demon he is. And then he was so much envious of the Pandavas. And Gandhari was so much envious of Kunti Maharani that she couldn't tolerate the children who were born to Kunti Maharani before her children came to this world. So she has to stop her garbha, from growing. So it just came out. So we see that she was envious. She was envious of Kunti Maharani. So far as chastity means, this is Kunti Maharani. She is very chaste. She was chaste to her husband Pandu, and also she is very chaste to Krishna. We see that how she is wonderfully glorifying Krishna. So this is the women that we want to follow. You want to follow Queen Kunti, Queen Draupadi, or Devahuti. Devahuti, just imagine how she was chaste. She was so chaste to Kadamuni that Kadamuni, after giving her a child, especially a male child, he just left. But then she was remaining very chaste to her husband even after he has gone. Then the child, which is who is none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kapila Dev. So she got good instructions from Kapila Dev. Then Kapila Dev also left. So she was alone. But still, she did not go for any remarriage or simply waste the human form of life that she has got. She was chaste to Krishna, and she was chaste to her husband also. And she is glorified in Srimad Bhagavatam. How Devahuti is glorified in Srimad Bhagavatam, that we can see in the 3rd canto. So these are the women that we want to have as an ideal principle, not just simply Gandhari or the other women. So that's the ultimate point, that a brahmachari following the principles of brahmacharya, or a girl taking up the principle of chastity, is ultimately meant for the pleasure of Krishna. not that anything for sense gratification. If at all these principles are meant for sense gratification, which is also there, recommended to a certain degree as per Dharma in the Shastra, but ultimately it all should go for the pleasure of Krishna, else it's all Shamayevahi Kevalam. Dharma sonashtitasya pumsam visvakshenu katasyaha nodpadayet yadiratim Shamayevahi Kevalam. You just waste, just following all the principles, just be a very chaste wife, but then never chaste to Krishna, then it's all nonsense. Srila Prabhupada, he says that if one doesn't become a lover of God by following the Vedic principles, so if someone doesn't become a lover of God, then this is just nonsense. You are just following this principle, oh, I followed this dharma, but did you become a lover of God? No. Then it's nonsense. One is a very chaste wife, but not at all a devotee of Krishna, then this is nonsense. As per Srimad Bhagavatam, this is nonsense. That's why we see that it's very difficult, the level of the gopis. Gopis, they just give up their husbands. They gave up their, the child on the lap, getting fed by the own mother. But still, that child, they just left and then went to Krishna. This is a very high chaste principle. It looks like they have given up their so-called husbands. But this is the highest chaste principles. That's the highest morality that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna Yatra Pata Danudara Tatra Shivayo Bhuti Dhruva Niti. So Krishna says that whenever my discussion is happening and when my devotees are present, then there is the supreme morality. So if somebody wants to be supremely chaste, then they have to come to the principle of surrendering to Krishna. Otherwise there is no point. That's why we see that Srimad Bhagavatam, having such exalted principles of surrendering to Krishna, is only for the Paramahamsas. Dharma prochita kahitava atra parma nirmat saranam satam. All these mundane principles of Dharma, they're all kicked out of Srimad Bhagavatam. Just because, we want everybody to follow the principles of Brahmacharya, chastity, or all the principles that Varnashma set forth. All these things we want to follow. But all these principles are meant for pleasing Krishna. And somebody who is in a very high stage, Paramahamsa stage, they may be able to give up these principles. These gopis, it may look like they have given up the principles of chastity. No, they are all seated in the Paramahamsa stage. So they could act in such a way. But others we are not to that level, in that Paramahamsa level. So we have to follow this principle. We want to follow all these principles, that whatever Srila Prabhupada says here in this particular section, we want to follow all these principles. But all these principles should ultimately meant for the pleasure of Krishna. If that is not going for their pleasure, then it's just Shamayevahi Kevalam. So let us follow the principle, just like Kunti followed the principles of chastity, but then she was chaste to the Supreme Lord Krishna. She is a pure devotee of Krishna. And then the example of Queen Draupadi. In fact, Draupadi was asked by the queens of Krishna that how she is able to serve her husbands. So these principles ought to be followed, and also the ultimate principle of accepting Krishna as the real Purusha. Purusha means husband, the enjoyer. So that also to be taken in a very important note, and that also should be followed. So Srila Prabhupada, he speaks all these things in this context. And then later we see that how Yayati and then Devayani, though they had this attraction of male-female, they just gave up. I think it comes in the next chapter, how Yayati also left Devayani, and then he took up the principle of Vanaprasthan, entered, and then finally he went back home, back to Godhead, and then she also, taking instruction from her husband, she also followed the same principle of surrendering to Krishna, and she also went back home, back to Godhead. So ultimately this is the point. Otherwise, somebody who is very chaste, or somebody is very much attracted to the husband or the wife, these things are materially like following dharma, somebody who is not following the supreme dharma of surrendering to Krishna, for them these things are really needed. For others, they should follow this principle, and then ultimately they should also come to the position of surrendering to Krishna. Otherwise, we see that there is a very famous verse in Bhagavatam that Srila Prabhupada often quotes, Pumsas triya mituni bhavametam tayor mito hriday granthi mahu. So, Bhagavatam condemns the attachment between husband and wife. Pumsas triya mituni bhavametam. Because of the attachment between husband and wife, then aham mameti, that the principle of I am the enjoyer and these things are mine that I have to enjoy. So these principles of enjoyment, which is centered on the principle of attraction between husband and wife, is not all accepted in Srimad Bhagavatam. How many times Srila Prabhupada quoted this? That the central principle of material life is the attraction between the husband and wife. And that has to be given up. In fact, the sloka just before this verse, Pumsas Triya, it is mentioned that one who is having attraction for the family, wife, husband, children, then he is no less than a foolish animal. So this is what Srimad Bhagavatam teaching us, that we should not be attached to these mundane principles. All these mundane principles should come to the position of surrendering to Krishna. In fact, Srila Prabhupada in one lecture he says that in the Western countries, because this principle of husband and wife being together whole life is not there, and because of that slackening, so because of the husband and wife, they are not much attracted, because they easily give a divorce and then go. So there is no attraction between the husband and wife. Then because of that no family attachment, then the path of self-realization in one sense becomes easy, because there is no attachment for the husband and wife. But we should know that this the Pumsastriya Mithuni Bhavam refers not just to the attraction between the husband and wife, it just refers to the attraction between a male and female. So though in the Western world there is no proper family life because of so many divorces, which we definitely were against, but because of no proper family life, this doesn't mean that there is no attraction. In fact, there is no attraction between husband and wife, but then there is always attraction between a man and woman. Pumsastriya refers to man and woman. So there may not be attraction between husband and wife, but there is always attraction between man and woman. So we have to stress these principles of chastity or getting properly married, principles of brahmacharya, because you may not have this attraction of this husband and wife as per Vedic principle, but then you always have the attraction of the opposite sex. Male is always attracted to the female and female is always attracted to the male. If at all one can transcend the human level and go to the Paramahamsa stage, that is accepted. But then that's not the case. They just trans down, they just go down, they become like an animal. So in Western society, people are living like animals. And Vedic society, which is recommending to live like a human society, taking up the principles of brahmacharya, chastity, or the sati system, widow system, early marriage, or all the varnashrama principles, it's all meant for living a very peaceful life, and ultimately it should take us to the position of surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna. So I stop here. So any questions, comments?
Family which is more better money wise, like
have difficulty. They have difficulty.
No, they kind of follow this money culture that now it's time for me to get married. Anyways, I have enjoyed whatever I have enjoyed in my college friends. Now I have to get settled down. So when that settled down concept comes, then they will look for a more rich boy or a more rich man. So it's all internal. And as it is the early language was so correct. Sometimes we see that these girls and boys they get attracted in college life and they get married, and then most of the time it ends up in a divorce because they don't understand that point that what is right for them and what is wrong. As they take the decision individually, they don't consider all this these nitty-gritties of dharma.
Yeah.
It's all interlinked with the small people's problem.
Yes. Yeah. In one sense, here, as Prabhupada says that boy and girl should be on an equal level. But if the boy is on a higher level, that is always welcome. Even if somebody has a daughter, and then it's always good. Maybe it's natural also that when they have a daughter, they want a boy from a higher. Higher means within their society, but somewhat higher. If he is a Vaishya, then he may think that I am this much level rich, though at least my son-in-law should be a little bit richer. So in that way, equal or rich, yeah, that's there. But very importantly, whatever be the case, but still the astrological compatibility has to be seen. Recently, Maharaj, he just spoke about the Grahastha issues. There, whomever Maharaj interviewed, all the Grahasthas, they were saying this one particular point, and Maharaj is also confirming, and they all know that Maharaj is also favoring that point, that before marriage, the astrological compatibility has to be seen. That solves most of the problems. Though there is no ideal husband and wife in the material world, but almost that solves most of the problems. If the astrological matches are done, then most of the problems are done. Yeah, I just stop here. Hare Krishna Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.